Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, the Ukraine war. Yes, it's still going on in the background. It's kind of dropped out of the news cycle a bit, but it's still there, still rumbling on, despite all the early assurances early on in the war that, 2 weeks, bro, the Ukrainians were going to beat Putin back. They didn't have a chance. Russia would be driven from Ukraine. It doesn't seem to really be going that way. It is now nearly a year since the special military operation or invasion, depending on what side you're on, obviously. One man's invasion is another man's special military operation, I guess. It's all down to perspective. It has been trundling on, and it does not seem to be going too well for the Ukrainians. Of course, if you're in the West and you sort of listen to the mainstream news, all you will hear about is about how incredibly successful the Ukrainians have been, which is why they need more money, more material, more tanks constantly, and why they haven't managed to, push to, the top of Crimea or managed to push to the edge of Russia's borders even a little bit. So yeah, it's not looking great. However, there has been some rather interesting information coming out over the internet. Now, I'd just like to preface this by saying I can't really verify this, okay? Obviously, right? This is from Hurseda Haber, which are a Turkish newspaper. They have released what they allege are some casualty numbers that have been leaked from Mossad. This raises a whole bunch of other questions. Why would Mossad leak these numbers? Are these numbers made up? Is there some kind of weird fuckery going on? We know that Turkey is closer to the Russian side of the orbit than the NATO side, even though they are a member of NATO. Is there sort of like movements afoot to do a sort of shuffle and try and make peace with Russia after a year, realizing that the economic sanctions aren't really working and that Ukraine is getting hammered on the battlefield? I merely present this information to you as I find it. Ukrainian and Russian casualties according to Mossad. Now, these are like the first sort of, legit numbers, that seem like even realistic numbers to come out. All the numbers that have been coming out previously have all been like, oh yes, the Russians are being destroyed, no. Well, if they're being destroyed, why haven't they been driven from Ukraine yet? Why do they need constant more supplies of money and material? I guess, it's a mystery. As the first year of the Russia-Ukraine war is approaching, the war losses claimed by Israeli intelligence reveal the terrible dimensions of the war. Allegedly, so even this paper is saying allegedly, the field data of January the 14th, so this is 2.5 weeks ago, something like that, based on Israeli intelligence, are listed as follows. Russia, with 418,000 soldiers and 3.5 million reservists, holy crap, that's a lot of soldiers, and a growing number of Wagner mercenaries, have lost 23 planes, 56 helicopters, 21 UAVs, approximately 900 tanks, 420 howitzers, 12 air defense systems, 18,500 dead, 44,500 injured, 323 captured. However, on the Ukrainian side, 734,000 soldiers plus 100,000 reservists and NATO officers, soldiers, and mercenaries have lost 302 aircraft, 202 helicopters, 2,750 UAVs, 6,300 tanks and armored vehicles, 7.3 thousand howitzers, 497 defense systems, 157,000 dead soldiers, 234,000 injured soldiers, 17,230 captured, 234 dead military NATO trainers, and about 2,500 dead NATO soldiers, 5,300 dead mercenaries. So this is basically, in terms of soldiers dead, a 10-to-1 ratio in favor of the Russians. Oof. I mean, if this is true, it would certainly explain some of the stuff that is coming out of Ukraine recently. There are reports that Ukraine has been pressing older and older people into service, that there are teams now sort of roaming around Ukraine looking for any military-age men that they can impress. Now, I'm sure some people, who are watching this would be like, Chris, Russian propaganda, everything is fine. Well, it's not. fine. It is clearly not fine. Things are clearly not going well for the Ukrainians. And I hate to say, I told you so. Well, it wasn't really me, but John Mearsheimer was the guy who originally basically said, look, if Ukraine gets into this, they're going to get absolutely destroyed. And I agreed with him at the time, and it's bloody happening. Man, war is hell. Seriously. In addition to that, we have also had the implosion of the Mozart Group. Now, the Mozart Group was basically a sort of clever, cheeky response to the Wagner Group, which is the Russian sort of private military contractors that have been sort of going through Donbass and stuff like that. And they were like training Ukrainian soldiers and getting foreign reservists to come in, but they have apparently collapsed, dogged by various funding scandals, and there is talk of hookers and alcohol and a massive falling out between their members. If you want to read the full sordid tale, I'll leave a link down in the description. This is, of course, from the New York Times, the paper of record. It's got to be true, bros, if it's in the New York Times. I mean, usually, of course, the New York Times doesn't say anything negative about what's going on in Ukraine. And generally speaking, if you watch the media a lot, you can tell when a major pivot is about to happen, right? The establishment doesn't pivot on a dime. Oh, no, that'd be too large a loss in credibility. They start to seed the ground first, right? They start laying out a few scapegoats, a few plausible reasons why they may have to reverse course. And this may indeed be one of them. Of course, there could be other reasons why the Mozart Group has been thrown under the bus, which we will get to in a second. So originally they were being funded by a bunch of donors. Everyone was coming up to them at parties and being bro, can I just give you money? They were allegedly rescuing civilians from war-torn Ukraine. I have no idea whether that's true or not. I have no idea whether this group was actually doing legit stuff or whether there's some shady front group. I have no idea, bros. I really don't know. And I'm certainly not going to trust the New York Times, sort of unconditionally in this regard. Anyway, the two owners, Andrew Bain and Andrew Milburn, are basically suing each other now. It seems very acrimonious breakup. Here you can see some lovely photos of them, in Ukraine. They had 50 employees, a group of Jewish Ukrainian financiers, and a Texas tycoon giving the money. Everyone involved said it became stressful just making payroll, so they started running out of money. Now, the real question is how much of this withdrawal of support had to do with Andrew Milburn's rather indiscreet take while getting drunk on a live stream. Now, anyone who works in the live streaming business will tell you, don't ever get too wasted on a live stream. You may say something you regret. In the case of the head of the Mozart Group, he really dropped the big one. Let's watch.
It's a corrupt, fucked up society. So I'm not a big fan of Ukraine. Oh, what is that?
This is Buffalo Trace.
Okay. And the Ukrainians are in violation of the Hague Convention. There is a, I forget the exact phraseology, but it is, we looked at this closely, and it's there should be no filming of the phrase, the terminology is bringing attention, blah 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 blah, to media, and yes, the Ukrainians are violating that. The
Ukrainians are violating the Hague Convention. I don't think he was supposed to say that. The Ukrainians can't violate a war crimes convention. No. They are the good guys, right? By definition, literally anything they do is good. They are fighting the evil Putin. Or, of course, you could just say, so what if they violated the Hague Convention? Putin started an illegal war. That absolves all sins, because I guess, the idea that you should behave more virtuously than your enemy is, no one really believes that in the modern world. Am I right?
Absolutely. And there are They're filming of a number of things that they're doing with POWs is violating law of armed conflict, and you can't, guys.
Right.
Killing Russian prisoners is
right.
So they are killing Russian prisoners, according to Andrew Milburn, and he would probably be someone to know. He was on the ground as a private military contractor in Ukraine. Now, I can hear the people saying, "Oh, but Chris, the Russians have been killing prisoners as well." Possibly, but that's not how these laws are supposed to work, right? There's not supposed to be a thing under the Hague Convention that says, "Oh, well, one side did it, therefore that's okay, we can do it." No. All sides are supposed to hold to the convention. Of course, the conventions, I think, were passed in ages ago, right? Like back in the before times, before guerrilla war and stuff like that. No one believes in that stuff anymore.
In the past, in you like Latin America or whatever, if U.S. Forces or employees were involved with any force that committed, war atrocities or whatever,
back, right?
you have to, you're done.
Yeah.
But we're obviously not going to pull our support from Ukraine at this point. These violations.
It's atrocities. No,
yeah.
It still is. You shouldn't kill dudes who, everyone knows who surrendered. And there was plenty of that.
Oh, mate, this guy just destroyed his entire career. Oh, you shouldn't kill people who have surrendered. So the implication clearly is that Ukraine has been doing that. Oof. Now, this podcast was from December 28th, during the Christmas break. And surprise, surprise, the Mozart Group appears to have collapsed around the start of February. I wonder if there is a link between the two things. I couldn't possibly speculate, obviously.
But my point is, it's not about Ukraine. We're not I happen to have, Ukraine flag tied to my bag, but I'm not, oh my God, Ukraine's so awesome. No, because I understand that there are plenty fucked up people running Ukraine. It's not about that. It's about global norms, right?
Right.
It's about Putin. It's allowing dudes in the 21st century like Putin to do what they want to do.
It's a just fight.
Yeah, it is.
It's about global norms. Do you mean global norms like the Hague Convention, for example? Oh my God, this is such a retarded position. I get what he's saying, right? It's about pushing back against evil Putler and making sure that he, can't just invade stuff, because everybody knows that only the West gets to invade countries without a UN mandate, right? We can't allow that power to anyone else. The level of cognitive dissonance must just be insane. But yes, he admits basically that Ukraine is extremely messed up, is being run by a bunch of very, very fucked up people, and they are doing a bunch of very fucked up stuff. Now, of course, this is exactly counter to the narrative that you will hear, on the mainstream news, or indeed if you run into anyone who is, vociferously pro-Ukraine. From their point of view, Ukraine is a plucky, struggling democracy that basically banned all opposition parties, full of pluralism, after they banned the Russian language, and, all this kind of other stuff. And if you point out that, they're not really a democracy anymore, you get the answer, well, they are at war. Okay, I guess, but that makes them just as bad as the Russians, surely. You lose that sort of moral edge. So anyway, the entire thing might be going tits up. Now, this is from USSA News, hardly a reputable website, but it's quoting some other stuff. I have seen this story going around. So according to the Swiss newspaper Neue Zürcher Zeitung, NZZ, CIA Director William Burns went to Moscow on a secret trip and offered Russia 20% of Ukraine to end the war. 20% of Ukraine would be about the size of Donbass. The liberal Washington Post reported last month Burns had met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. Supposedly the deal was submitted in January. So this is very, very interesting. So according to this, Biden sent the CIA director over to Moscow to try and cut a deal with Putin, and said that they would get 20% of Ukraine. Now, I mean, to be perfectly honest, the Russians already have about 20%. So this would be a sort of status quo kind of like deal. You know, basically everyone just takes what they've got and goes home. However, there has been some pushback to this suggestion. The offer apparently did not go over very well with either Ukraine or Russia. Yeah, I'm sure the Ukrainians would have been thrilled at the prospect. One would imagine that Ukraine was not too happy with being sideswiped. Kiev reportedly shut down the proposal, quote, because they are not willing to have their territory divided, while Russian officials said they will win the war in the long run anyway. So NZZ is apparently the Swiss newspaper of record. So this is mainstream media in Switzerland. Sean Savitt, the deputy spokesman for the National Security Council, said that the report was not accurate, which is an interesting remark because they didn't say it was completely untrue. Not accurate can mean there's one part of the report that isn't true, but the rest is substantially true. If the liberal Washington Post report is to be believed, why then did Burns go and meet with Zelensky if there wasn't something afoot? Good question. Dmitry Polonyarsky, Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations, told Newsweek the report from NZZ was interesting, but he couldn't comment on speculation. So he's not saying it's untrue either. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Monday that negotiations between Russia and Ukraine are now impossible since there are no conditions for them either de jure or de facto. So basically, the only real way there's going to be any kind of negotiations, it would seem, is through the US, and the US forcing the Ukrainians to come to terms that they dictate. Is it going to happen? I have no idea, but it doesn't look like it's going great, and I am wondering how they are going to pivot around to eventually inform people that Ukraine has lost. I'm sort of endlessly fascinated by these pivot points in the mainstream narrative, in the way they are constructed, and sort of generally always sort of fascinated and horrified by the number of people who just go along with it, right? You remind them that, you know, a year ago or 6 months ago, they believed like literally the exact opposite, and they're like, well, that was different. And I'm like, yeah, but you were completely wrong about this thing. Oh, no, but I'm completely right about everything this time. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and you got to the end, thank you. We love you very, very much. Please like, share, and subscribe and all of that good stuff. And I will see you again in a few days. Good night.